Not all pauses are voluntary. The shock and sheer physicality of an involuntary pause can render the maps that you've used to navigate your life to this point completely useless. In your desperation to begin again, you may find that not only do you not know the way, you no longer even know who you are. You are lost. A sudden pause is a threatening wilderness, and the strong sense of who you once were quickly unravels. The interesting thing about an involuntary pause is that there is a way to navigate through that lets you construct a new and more honest version of yourself. But first, you have to live completely in that pause for far, far longer than you want to, so that you can reorientate and build a brand new map for your world. So, 2017, 8th of June, Bloomsbury Hotel, London. I'd been networking over lunch with the clients of the technology company I founded. Next up, I was leading a workshop, so I headed down to the main hall to get set up. As I walked around the corner, I came face to face with my finance director, who was clearly on a call with my board of directors, at the very moment that he said, "So we'll put her on gardening leave then, effective immediately." Gardening leave is a fluffy term for dismissed, fired, given the chop, a kind of enforced isolation. We made eye contact. He knew I'd heard, but in my shock, I just carried on into the hall and did the workshop as planned. If anything, I was extra brilliant just to show them. By the end of the afternoon, the reality was no closer to having set in, so slightly drunk and very tearful, I got on a train and turned up on the doorstep of my best friend from high school. She took it surprisingly well. Just 7 months before, I'd been on top of the world, one of those startup success stories. We'd raised investment in record time. MasterCard had selected us for this prestigious global program. We'd been named top tech startup in Europe, and I'd won Innovator of the Year. Now I was handing back my computer, handing back my phone, and was legally blocked from having any contact with the staff and the clients that I'd come to think of as my friends. I insisted on keeping all the trophies we'd won. I said if they didn't like it, they could go win their own. I still have them in a box because I've absolutely nowhere to put them. It wasn't completely unexpected. 6 months of conflicts had left me stressed, ill, and defeated. My plans had been rejected, leaving my position as CEO unworkable. All the same, this ending, when it came, was brutal, sudden, and incomprehensible. Almost 20,000 hours of work over 5 and a bit years, that's 10.73 hours a day, 7 days a week, to nothing. No email, no phone calls, nothing. Definitely an involuntary pause. So, the first Monday morning of the rest of my life, I got up, opened my new computer, and I had literally no idea what to do next, except I had this overwhelming sense that if I didn't do something, anything, I would be lost. What I've come to learn is that this rush to begin again is a natural response to an involuntary pause. One founder told me how he closed down his company in the morning and wrote a panicked business plan for his rebound startup the same afternoon. But it is a response you should be ready to resist. You have to take your time, even though that vast expanse of time is absolutely terrifying. I had one call that day, and it was a call that changed my life. It was with a wonderful woman who'd had a similar experience, and she offered to coach me through the next 9 weeks of my gardening leave. Although I didn't understand it at the time, she was preparing a plan that would let me be present in and appreciative of this enforced stage of my involuntary pause. She gave me the structure, time, and means to be reflective. I committed in writing that every week I would go and visit a new garden. Yeah, I took the whole gardening leave thing completely literally, even though I live in a flat in the Clyde and I don't have a garden. So each week I went off to my garden and I took hundreds of pictures and I uploaded them to my new gardening leave Instagram account because I was going to totally rural gardening leave. And by 3 p.m. every Friday, I would send her a new garden leave selfie. And this was, on her part, genius on so many levels. Firstly, gardens are cheap, accessible, beautiful. They forced me outdoors without requiring any complex planning. For a plant lover like me, they actually forced me to be appreciative of the world around me, and I discovered that it was impossible to stay angry in a garden. So if you ever find yourself in an involuntary pause, find a physical place that is your equivalent of a garden, and make this where you walk through your wilderness. One of the weirdest things I've felt over the last 9 months, and the thing that I've put the most effort into fixing, is this incredible loss of my sense of self. Not just self-worth, although that was certainly part of it, but just a complete crisis of personal identity and meaning. And it's taken as long to fix that as any physical injury would. You can't rush through it because you are rebuilding yourself again. There aren't any shortcuts, but I didn't understand that, and so I wasn't prepared. My face had been the face of the company for so long, it didn't feel like my face anymore. And if other people had got sick of me popping up in their news feeds all the time, imagine how I felt being stalked around the internet by the more successful version of myself. It's actually really disconcerting. I felt like the company had got to keep my personal identity as part of our divorce settlement. And yet I'd got stuck with my face and my name, so then I was constantly having to explain to people that I didn't work there anymore. And their response was always the same. It was like, but you're the founder, it's your company, how does that work? I don't know, I have no idea, I have no clue, do I look like I know? Go away! And mostly, I avoided saying that out loud, but not always. There was one thing I did entirely by accident that really helped me regain control of my narrative and my identity. I started writing, and just by coincidence, because I already owned my personal domain name, I started publishing that. Some weeks I'd write 20,000 words. And that writing really struck a nerve with founders and entrepreneurs, and so I got an audience. People started getting in touch, thanking me for telling the reality of business like it was, and so an audience turned into a mission. I even professionalized myself a bit and made a logo. And then one day, I didn't hate that photo anymore. I no longer felt it was stalking me around, reminding me what a total failure I was. So I put a purple filter on it, and I used it on my blog. Of course, I'd started writing because I felt like I'd been excluded from my own personal narrative. I was just trying to process and understand my own story. But by writing and by tying it so closely to my own name, I started to rebuild my own identity as I built that narrative. The old stuff doesn't go away, but I drowned it out with the new. I was writing my travel journal through my wilderness long before I understood what new path I might be on. So, of course, those 9 weeks of gardening leave weren't the end of my pause. They weren't my new beginning. It's taken 9 months to feel I've fully transitioned through that pause, to be here at the start of my new beginning. It was a period of intense grief and intellectual numbness, although I didn't recognize it as grief to start with, because who grieves for the loss of a company? Well, me, it turns out. I threw myself into busy tasks. I started to decorate my flat, only to give up halfway when I just couldn't stand it anymore. My living room is still half painted, which I am now trying to position as a cool design feature. I went for a few interviews, only to discover that, like most entrepreneurs, I am completely unemployable. I had a few startup ideas, most of them completely ridiculous, and even then I lacked the stamina and the brain power. I had time, but no spark and no energy, and so the time felt very, very frightening. But I wasn't completely without a guide. This book, Transitions, was recommended to me by an MP who'd lost her seat at the general election, and with it, the career path that had laid so clearly ahead. It introduced me to the two concepts standing between me and my new beginning. The ending. Every transition starts with one. Endings begin with something going wrong. They're the first act of your play, not the last. And also the neutral zone, the pause if you like, an unproductive period where you're disconnected with the past, emotionally unengaged with the present, and yet very, very slowly edging your way to what will become a new future. The neutral zone can't be skipped. It's this place where you self-examine and you repair. You take internal and external input and you process it, and you start to rebuild a new personal identity. What you leave off the feature list of the next version of yourself is just as important as what you include. So I stand here now with a very strong sense of the people, the interests, and the activities I want in my life. I came out of my pause, writing, podcasting, working with startups that interest me. I'm campaigning as a Women's Enterprise Scotland ambassador. I care more about my eulogy virtues than my resume virtues. I seem to have completely lost my capacity for ass-kissing and polite compliance, and I have developed an open frankness that I think a lot of people find quite disconcerting. I might have been forced off the path that I was on, but I am a better person on a better path. Only my actions will tell, of course, but I do feel I have control over my narrative and my journey in a way that before my pause had become lost. I am ready for my new beginning. So, how do you avoid the pain of an involuntary pause? Well, the point is, of course, that you can't, just as you can't usefully prepare for it. Even if at a logical level you know that there's a possibility that you may fail in your studies, that you may suffer a catastrophic injury that ends your sporting career, have your visa denied, see the event that you've spent a year planning cancelled by snow. Yeah, that one. Even if you spend all of your time preparing for the worst, then you will never be able to achieve your very best. Instead, when life challenges you to the point that the old map no longer applies, pause. Accept that the end is only the start and that the long pause is an essential step. Find a physical place where you will walk through your wilderness. Keep a travel journal as you go. Don't beat yourself up if you don't finish painting your living room. Celebrate that it served its purpose as a brainless task. Be prepared to live deeply and completely in the pause, because it is in that pause that you will find the signs for what really matters and where you want to go next. It's where you will create your new map to a new beginning. Thank you.